My name is Ann Katz, and I'm the chair of Temple Beth David's Adult Education. Our year-long theme is healing through Jewish values. Before I introduce the speaker, I would like to thank the Adult Education Committee, and especially Bobby Sadow, who has tirelessly put all the materials together to promote these programs, as well as being our Zoom master, so we can bring them to you. Please visit Temple Beth David's website for adult education and our Scholar in Residence programming with Rabbi Deborah Eisenman. Our speaker today is another one of our talented Temple Beth David affiliates who has both professional and personal experience in healing through Jewish values. She is a social worker who treated families, couples, and individuals for over 45 years. A graduate of the Columbia University School of Social Work, she trained professionals of varied disciplines in clinical and academic settings and wrote over 30 published articles. She presented on January 24th about her own personal experience to healing, and her book, Bridge to Healing, Finding Strength to Cope with Illness, was a major part of the discussion. This morning, she will share stories contained in her newest book, Miracle Nation, 70 Stories about the Spirit of Israel. These inspiring stories are about exceptional individuals doing humanitarian tikkun olam work in Israel and around the world. These heartwarming stories are about efforts to improve the lives of Jews and Arabs, apply technology to third world problems, and seek peaceful coexistence with neighbors, show Israel's resilient, creative, caring, and hopeful spirit, and why she considers Israel a miracle nation. It is my delight to introduce Israela Meyerstein. As a note, just please hold your questions to the end of the program. And I also forgot to say, we are co-sponsoring with Sisterhood. So Sisterhood, thank you so much for co-sponsoring this with Adult Ed. Israela.
Thank you very much, Anne, to you and your committee, and to Bobby. Very heartfelt thanks for your patient support. The two miracles today will be Israel and my PowerPoint working. Okay, so thank you for inviting me to talk about something very special and personal and close to my heart, and that is the state of Israel. I have to make one quick tweet. Mike, close the door. I have a little hearing, okay? Sorry. Okay. I have visited Israel almost 20 times, including living there for a year as a newly married student couple. Each visit has connected me more to the land, the people, and the spirit of Israel. My youngest son went to medical school there, and starting in 2012, I began an annual practice of going to Israel to give pro bono workshops in my field of social work and family therapy, along with hands-on volunteering. It was on a recent visit that I decided to write a book about Israel's amazing spirit and to celebrate what so many in the world try to tear down. In the dedication to the book, I wrote, "This book is dedicated in honor of the miraculous state of Israel upon reaching her 70th birthday. It is also in memory of the souls of my paternal grandparents, aunt, uncle, and many other relatives I never met who perished in the smokestacks of Treblinka. And to my family, my husband, with whom I share so much in common, including being second-generation children of the Holocaust, and to my children and grandchildren who are the future of the Jewish people. I wrote the book because, like Ben-Gurion, I believe that Israel, although not perfect, with all its warts, is still a miracle. That's his quote. I wanted to counter the negative press and stereotypes in world forums and show Israel's robust, creative, caring, and hopeful spirit. I wanted to share about the amazing humanitarian startups that are the embodiment of Tikkun Olam, and to show young people who embrace humanitarian values how much Israel puts them into practice. My goal was also to motivate pride in Israel among the next generation. Unlike my generation, those born after 1967 never experienced being banned from visiting the Western Wall or faced constant threats to Israel's very existence. They also seem less impacted by fears of anti-Semitism and its dangers. They also don't have the same sensitivity, awareness of the impact of our parents' generation's experiences. First, a little bit of geography. On this map, can you find the tiny little sliver state of Israel, smaller than the state of New Jersey? Israel has always lived in a tough neighborhood, to be sure. Even today, at least two major powers, Iran and Turkey, have a hegemonic vision of destroying Israel and creating a fertile crescent right through Israel's land connection to the Mediterranean Sea. While the recent opening of business relations with some Arab nations is positive, plenty of danger remains. Let's begin at the very beginning by going back in time to September 1948. I'd like to invite you to a small bedroom scene where two parents are gazing at their newborn child. Let's listen into their imagined conversation. Mother, I feel so grateful watching her rest peacefully. Father, yes, she looks so innocent, especially about all the horrors of the world. Mother, she will give us a fresh start to rebuild our family. I will pray every day for her well-being. When we lost our dear little girl Faith at age 3.5 to illness, I thought I would never recover. These past few years have been so difficult, especially when we were separated from each other during the war while you served in Europe. I worried about you constantly. Father, yes, I missed you terribly as well. I still feel so much guilt and sorrow that I couldn't save our little girl. And then on top of that terrible loss, I learned from the Red Cross after the war that Mama, Papa, my younger brother Tevel, and my beautiful sister Rushka, along with other relatives, were exterminated at Treblinka. I wondered how I could recover from such devastating losses. Mother, we must find a way to move forward, especially for our daughter's sake, or she will always live in dark shadows. Let's begin by giving her a name with new meaning to signify a new beginning. Father, there are too many dead relatives to choose from to find a name for her. She needs a hopeful name, one that honors our people. What about naming her after the newborn state of Israel, just a few months old? We could call her Israela. Mother, that is such an unusual but beautiful name. I never heard it before. Father, I suppose if she had been a boy, the name would be Israel, referring to the name given to Jacob after his struggle with the angel. It is actually the name of the Jewish people who have always struggled to survive and thrive. Mother, I hope we can provide a peaceful and happy life for our new little girl, Israela. May she always be blessed with good health and the wisdom to live up to her name. Mother and Father, Amen. So I guess from birth, I was destined to have a lifelong identification with Israel. We grew up at the same time, but under vastly different conditions. I grew up in a comfortable apartment in New York City, while little Israel faced enormous physical, military, economic, emotional, and spiritual challenges to existence. A poor country surrounded by enemies desiring her destruction, absorbing thousands of refugees, young and old Holocaust survivors, and new immigrants. For so many Jews, Israel was really just a miracle. many Jews, such as my father, mother, and aunt, the creation of the State of Israel was a personal and miraculous redemption of the Jewish people after the Holocaust, the biggest trauma in our long history of survival. My book begins with a brief recounting of our journey as wandering Jews from Sinai, where we received the 10 Commandments and learned that our purpose in the world was to implement humanistic values. Perhaps because we had a purpose, despite our wanderings, persecutions, and dispersions, in some ways we already were a nation, albeit a disempowered one, even before we became a state. Let's go back to those very early days. In fact, to the very moment when the State of Israel was born. Witness as David Ben-Gurion makes his famous announcement standing under the picture of Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism.
זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית. לפיכך נתכנסנו אנו חברי מועצת העם, נציגי היישוב העברי והתנועה הציונית, ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל. תוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית על יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
Perhaps some of you were even had the opportunity to visit and listen to that same declaration in Tel Aviv. As soon as independence was declared, tears of joy and dancing soon turned to fear as 5 Arab countries attacked the newborn state. In my book, I have a touching story about a 12-year-old boy who witnessed the fall of Jerusalem to the Jordanian forces in 1948, as well as the expulsion of the Jews from the Jewish quarter. It looked like a scene out of Eastern Europe during the war, and yet he and his mother still managed to heroically rescue his tefillin from his family's ransacked house in the old city and have a bar mitzvah. Most of you probably know the story of the ship Exodus, sailing originally from Baltimore Harbor to rescue children from displaced persons camps in Europe and to go to Palestine. Upon arriving at Haifa Harbor, however, the British blockaded the ship and turned it back to Cyprus and then Europe, an event that provoked world reaction and perhaps generated enough sympathy internationally to justify the establishment of a state. Israel is truly a country based on the strength of immigrants. It has absorbed more immigrants than any other country its size. In fact, immigration was part of state policy. Immigrants came from over 100 lands and in multiple waves. This required rapid growth in housing, employment, and social services, a tremendous challenge that took much more time than anticipated. And here they come. Sephardim came from Morocco and other countries, in Arab countries, as conditions there worsened for Jews. They would travel by foot all the way. At night, they would travel and they would hide by day for fear of being found and killed while traversing Arab lands on the way to Palestine. Many followed the dream predicted in the Bible about returning to the land on wings of eagles. In fact, one of the operations was called On the Wings of Eagles in 1949 to 50. It was later nicknamed Operation Magic Carpet. It brought Jews from Yemen, Aden, Djibouti, Eritrea, and Saudi Arabia. The name was given because some of the refugees lived in such primitive conditions that they did not know what an airplane was or how to behave on one. A few even tried to light a bonfire on the plane. Operation Ezra and Nehemiah brought 120,000 Jews from Iraq in 1950 to 52. After the state was founded, Iraqi Jews' lives became truly imperiled, including many public hangings, and they needed to be rescued as well. And we learned this just this week, the person, Mar Hillel, who just died at age 93, was responsible for bringing many of the Jews from Iraq. In total, over 750,000 Jewish refugees left Arab lands to escape persecution and death. The Six-Day War in 1967 kindled pride in Israel among Soviet Jews, leading to increased demands of "let my people go." In the 1970s and 80s, the movement to support Russian Jewry led to protests around the world. SSSJ, or the Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry, was active in securing American support via the Jackson-Vanik Amendment and the tremendous support of Secretary of State George Shultz, who just also passed away, that ultimately led to the release of over 1 million Jews. And between 1989 to 2006, 1.6 Soviet Jews left Russia, 1.6 million Soviet Jews left Russia, 61% of them went to Israel. Here's a picture of Anatoly Natan Sharansky and his wife Avital, together with Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Shamir, upon his arrival in Israel as a hero in 1986. A leader of the democracy movement and Soviet Jewry refuseniks, Sharansky was sentenced to serve over 10 years in prison for his activities. His new book, Never Alone, tells how he survived those years, partly by playing chess with himself in his head. Sharansky went on to serve in many positions in the Israeli government, including head of the Jewish Agency. A remarkable Jewish hero of modern times, he was awarded the Israel Prize in 2018, as both he and Israel turned 70, for his work in the field of Aliyah. In the 1970s, there was a terrible drought and civil wars in Africa. Ethiopian Jews made strong efforts to traverse the Sudan, also by foot, and the Sudan is an enemy country of Israel, so it was at great peril that they took the journey to reach Israel. Many were injured and many died. A secret mission called Operation Brothers from 1979 to 84 helped many escape the Sudan to Israel. It is touchingly portrayed in the film Red Sea Diving Resort, which was a temporary secret shield for the operation. Ethiopian Jews wanted to return to the Holy Land, and more than 90,000 were able to return. In 1984, there was Operation Moses, and in 1991, a more urgent operation was needed because of destabilizing conflict conditions in the Sudan. Operation Solomon brought 15,000 in one day. Each plane load normally carried 200 passengers, so they took out the seats and took 400 on each flight. Here is Natan Sharansky welcoming French immigrants who made Aliyah as conditions of anti-Semitism worsened in their country. Netanya, where many settle, now has lots of French speakers and great croissants. Lastly, Nefesh B'Nefesh has sent over 60,000 Western immigrants and 8,000 lone soldiers since the early 2000s. Now to the core of the book. At the core of Miracle Nation are stories about Tikkun Olam, our purpose in the world. God gave us the Torah as his pilot project for humanity. As Abraham Joshua Heschel said, living is not a private affair of the individual. It is what man does with God's time, what man does with God's world. Let us remember that 120 years ago, Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, advocated for a Jewish state as both a homeland, a refuge, and also a society with a more righteous social system that was operated by humanistic values. While Israel has stunning technological and medical startups, in fact, the largest number after Silicon Valley, my book is about her humanitarian startups. Perhaps because Israel began as a poor country, a robust volunteerism sector had to develop to supplement the government services. Today, almost half the population is involved in some kind of volunteer work to improve society. For my book, I made an outline of what I consider to be very important Tikkun Olam values. Then I sought out people and organizations whose work embodied those values. I invited them to tell me, write, or collaborate on writing their personal stories. It was so inspiring for me to, quote, meet, unquote, so many inspiring people, either in person, by email, phone, or writing, and hear their stories. I had to do a lot of networking, which was challenging yet enjoyable, and I even have a couple of stories, exciting stories about how I got the stories. So let's examine some of the values. The first one, the earth is the Lord's, protecting the environment. When God created the world, he expected man to take care of it, saying, "Be careful, do not destroy my world." We thus have a mandate to protect the earth because saving the environment is built into the Bible. As we know, Israel is a water superpower, a leading edge in agricultural drip irrigation methods, water conservation, desalination, wastewater recycling, and the newest, making water out of air. Israel is the only country where desertification has receded. From 15 miles to 16 miles away, the desert has shrunk from cities. One story is written by an Orthodox rabbi who started an organization called Tevel B'Tzedek, the Earth and Justice, to help farmers in Asia through a Peace Corps type of organization that utilizes Israelis who frequently travel to Asia and teaches advanced agricultural methods to Nepalese farmers to help improve their society. Another story, Water Knows No Borders, is a charming tale about 3 girls, 1 Israeli, 1 Jordanian, and 1 Palestinian, fearful strangers to each other who meet for the very first time as youth representatives for EcoPeace Middle East to study the challenges of saving the Dead Sea. Over the course of hiking and learning together, they become fast friends with new positive views of the other. Here is an outdoor class at the Arava Institute at Kibbutz Keturah with Rabbi Michael Cohen. Students come from around the world to learn about ecology and sharing natural resources across borders. It also holds seminars through an international peace-building institute. Saving a life, the highest value in Jewish tradition. And here is my story about how I got the story. I had read an interview with former Deputy Chief of Staff, Major General Yair Golan, who served on the Golan Heights, and from his post, he witnessed the terrible carnage against Syrian civilians during the Civil War. As an Israeli and a Jew, he felt he must do something to help. So his unit built a field hospital to help the wounded Syrians, even transporting more serious cases to hospitals in northern Israel for treatment. While in enemy country, those wounded Syrian civilians who received Israeli aid came to view Israel not as the Satan they were taught about. I felt so touched by his written interview that I felt I must have it in my book. But no matter what I tried, I could not get hold of this general. After all, the Israeli army is not exactly small, nor an open book. I even prepared interview questions requested by the army, but that led nowhere. So I was really disappointed because I felt this story needed to be told, but I had to give up and move on. Then, several months later, I was attending the annual FIDF, Friends of Israel Defenses, dinner in Baltimore. At the cocktail hour, I was chatting with friends. Suddenly, I spied someone walk past me with a name tag that said Yair Golan. Oh my God, it was the general. I recognized him from his picture. I quickly excused myself and followed him. I told him I had been hunting him for several months. He probably wondered who I was, but after I asked him if I could use his wonderful interview for my book, he quickly smiled and gave me permission. Saving Children's Hearts, it's known as SAH, was founded by Dr. Ami Cohen. He was in the center with the mask operating, a compassionate pediatric cardiac surgeon. SAH has helped over 5,000 poor children with congenital heart defects from 60 countries to obtain free surgeries in Israel. The doctors bring the children to Tel HaShomer Hospital near Tel Aviv, where the surgeries take place, and the children and their family member or members live in a children's house nearby during that time. Zach doctors travel around the world to screen for candidates, and they do follow-ups and training of professionals in many countries. My youngest son, Shannon, who went to the Medical School for International Health at Ben Gurion University in Beersheba, wrote a story about his volunteering with Zach in Tel Aviv, and then later in Zanzibar, where he shadowed 2 Israeli cardiologists as they examined hundreds of patients, spending long hours every day for a week. One day, my son was watching and became puzzled that 2 little kids looked somewhat familiar to him, yet he couldn't figure out why. But when they said Todah and Lehitraot to the doctors after their exams, he realized he had met them when they were purple and thin and sickly, about to have their surgeries in Israel a year or so before. Now they were back home and healthy, thanks to Zach. Here's a picture of Dr. Cohen with several of his many patients. Tragically, he died in his 40s while climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in the Himalayan mountains with his daughter. But his organization continues to grow and thrive to save lives. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. The Torah specified laws about leaving crops in the fields for the poor and hungry as part of a compassionate practice of redistributive justice in ancient Israeli society. This next story concerns Joseph Gittler, a young Jewish man from Teaneck, New Jersey, who came to Israel during the early 2000s. At that time, there was a lot of poverty and hunger in the Israeli population and Arab population due to long-term effects of the Intifada. He saw supermarkets and caterers disposing of perfectly good, just not very beautiful produce. And Joseph began practicing a practice of collecting food to deliver in his pickup truck to the hungry. Joseph's motto, quote, "No schnitzel left behind," led him to persevere. And today, his organization, which I'm sure all of you have heard of, Leket Israel, the one he founded, has grown to Israel's largest food redistribution center with dozens of trucks, over 100 employees, and 37,000 volunteers, serving over 200 million hot meals, as well as being Israel's main food rescue operation. This picture is of Leket volunteers working in the fields. Another form of justice is religious freedom. Here you see a group of women called Women of the Wall, which was founded in 1988 by Anat Hoffman. Often, such religious gatherings would be on the receiving end of pelted tomatoes, curses, and screams by ultra-Orthodox men and women who disapproved of this form of prayer. The organization continues to campaign for the rights of women to have organized worship at the Western Wall, for girls to have bat mitzvahs, and offers educational seminars worldwide. Not so long ago, a Kotel agreement was being negotiated, but in 2017, Netanyahu canceled the discussions, bowing to ultra-Orthodox pressure. At the same time, Natan Sharansky spoke up forcefully for religious pluralism, upset that the wall, Western Wall, something that should unite all Jews, was becoming a source of division instead. He said, "There should be room for all of us here." Women of the Wall provides ways for women to celebrate bat mitzvahs, although without the full services provided to men. Anat Hoffman, the founder of Women of the Wall, also founded Iraq, Israeli Religious Action Center, which fights for the rights of minority populations. Another value, God loves all of his creations, inclusion. Here you see Israeli President Reuven Rivlin saluting with the graduating class of Special in Uniform. The group is named Special in Uniform. Serving in the army is such an important part of Israeli society, and those who previously couldn't serve because of disabilities felt left out. But Israel's army is unique in having a special program for young soldiers with disabilities, so that truly no soldier gets left behind. The recruits get special training in life skills for independent living and training in specialized tasks during Army service. They are also helped to find jobs in society afterwards. A related group called Ro'im Rachok includes soldiers on the autistic spectrum in the Army. Because of their disorder, they have special skills in focusing and seeing tiny details, which suits work in monitoring for many hours and intelligence. 1/8 of Israelis have disabilities, some quite severe. Ala Negev was founded by General Dror Almog, a hero of Entebbe, in memory of his son Iran, who died at age 23 and was treated at that village of 750 residents. And here you see our mitzvah twinning ceremony with an American tourist with some of the residents of the village. More recent programs are the National Shalva Center that offers a range of sophisticated therapies for those with severe disabilities from infancy to adulthood, as well as respite family support. The brand new Shalva Center, located at the western entrance to Jerusalem, makes a statement of its importance to the society. Shekulo Tov is an Israeli program for export that offers on-the-job training to young adults to work in coffee houses and bookstores with supervision. Another value, loving thy neighbor. Givat Chaviva was founded in 1949 in the Wadi Ara region for Jews and Arabs who wound up living in geographically divided communities because of where the border wall became. Through cultural exchanges and programs, relationships were developed between Arabs and Jews. They also sponsor the Jewish Arab Center for Peace to foster positive relationships between communities. This picture shows a demonstration for peace, and an Arab woman took a banana leaf, a giant banana leaf, and in Arabic wrote, encouraging love and tolerance and understanding, and the Israeli woman was holding it up on the other side. Kibbutz Hanaton is a conservative kibbutz in the Galilee that reaches out to neighboring Bedouin and Muslim villages and creates programs for youth to get to know each other, as well as post-high school Tikkun Olam programs. And another wonderful program is Hand in Hand Schools. Now there are 7 of them that have a joint Arab and Jewish curriculum and help children from early ages learn to be with the other. Compassion for the poor, the refugee, and the stranger. It is written 37 times in the Torah, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger. This is to remind us how to help, how our people were helped and needed help at a time and needed support, and we need to have that attitude towards others in that condition. Terem Emergency Refugee Health Clinic treats Sudanese and other refugees living in South Tel Aviv as well as other parts of the country. A volunteer physician, shown in the picture, describes his work as challenging because the Africans often bring different cultural views about illness, but also rewarding because he recognizes that we were once strangers in a new land and needed that support as well. Yad Sarah today is the largest volunteer organization providing services for all ages from 1 to seniors. It began as a volunteer Gemacht or lending association for medical equipment and has expanded to many different areas, including children and dental care, housing and legal advocacy, support for Holocaust survivors, and volunteering opportunities for seniors. If you have watched television coverage of disasters such as the Mexican earthquake or Hurricane Wilma, you might have noticed people's t-shirts saying IsraAid on their backs. IsraAid is a rescue organization that is often the first to arrive to offer help in disasters and often the last to leave because they stay to engage the community in rebuilding. And here is their story. Hopefully here is their story. And if you're interested, they have many other videos of different situations where they have helped. What often happens is they get to a community in disaster, and beside providing the physical relief, they partner with the local community organizations, often Jewish organizations who have invite volunteers to help with the work. When the hurricane happened in Houston, in the flooding, because it affected the Jewish community so strongly, they partnered with the Yazidi Christian community there to start. Another story is called White Knight on Four Wheels, and it tells about this man, Amatzia Dayan, and his colleagues, the founder of the organization, another man named Yuval Roth. They serve as volunteer drivers for an organization called Derech Achlama, or Way to Recovery. And in the picture, you see a Palestinian mother and her daughter, who is the patient. And the drivers pick up the Palestinians at the checkpoints and take them to hospitals in Israel for treatment, and then back again to the checkpoints. The Palestinians they help call the Israelis Anashim Tovim, good people. One of my favorite organizations, because another way of looking at technology is technology for the good of mankind, is Innovation Africa. It used to be called Jewish Hearts for Africa, and it helps millions of people, Africans living in drought-ridden villages in several countries. I learned about the organization from my kids, and I was fascinated by the work they do. But how was I going to reach them in Africa to get a story? So here's another little story about getting a story. One Shabbat in Jerusalem, we were invited to Friends. There we met another couple. In our conversation, the husband proudly mentioned that their daughter-in-law, Sivan, had created a wonderful organization to help African villages facing drought. My ears perked up and I said, by any chance, do you mean Sivan Yaari of Innovation Africa? Bingo! From then I got Sivan's direct contact information, and she graciously wrote a wonderful story for the book. Her picture is even on the book's cover. And here's the story. I know it will touch your heart.
Typhoid, diarrhea, vomiting. People use the very water. People get sick.
Unapata mgonjwa, homa, malaria.
Darkness, because we don't have light, we use kerosene, we don't deliver the services as we must.
It was really difficult for us children to study at night.
Kabla hatujapata mradi wa maji, tulikuwa tunahangaika sana kwa ajili ya kutafuta maji.
People drink muddy water, children studying without having a light. Even the mother couldn't give birth because the health center doesn't have a light at night. And for us at Innovation Africa, we want to change that.
Innovation Africa was founded 10 years ago with a very simple mission: to bring Israeli technologies to transform schools, medical centers, but most importantly, to pump water.
When we reach to communities and you mention the word water, at that time, you see the smile on faces of these people.
We identify the village that are in need of water. We build a tower and we distribute the water taps all around the village.
The first transformation we see ever, their skins improve.
Any human being should have access to clean water.
We have water under the ground. The sun is shining every day. With the knowledge and Israeli technology, we can make a change, and forever.
Once we do it, it completely transforms the village.
I believe Innovation Africa can change Africa.
We didn't have any dream of getting clean water in our community in Uganda here. So we really appreciate the team from Israel.
When we use this solar at night, children are able to read properly, the teachers are able to teach. We are very grateful for Innovation Africa.
Are you ready? Yes! 1, 2, 3, go!
I take this opportunity to thank Innovation Africa to bring us power in our facility.
You are our fathers and mothers from Israel.
Innovation Africa has made more children to come to study because of the lights and the water.
Innovation Africa kutuletea mradi wa maji, na sasa hivi maji mpaka shuleni yanafika. Natumia muda mwingi kusoma, sihangaiki tena kwenda kutafuta maji, na maji yako karibu. Tunawashukuruni sana Innovation Africa.
We are committed to bring water where there is drought, to bring light where there is darkness, to bring hope and dignity where there is despair.
So I don't know if you got verklempt watching this, but I've watched this dozens of times, and every time it's so touching. And just to tell you a little bit about Sivanya Ari, she in her 20s, she went to Africa to work for DoorDash. And there she beheld the extreme poverty and the lack of clean water, everything you've seen in the video. And she decided, as an Israeli, as a Jew, that our mission is to help people in the world. And this is the result of, probably by now it's closer to 15 years, but it's just, to me, remarkable. And this is the result also where people are appreciating what Israel can do and has done in their lands. Okay, more technology. As we know, Israel's known for so many inventions, too many to summarize. This is a picture of Dr. Amit Gopher, an engineer and inventor, who himself is quadriplegic that resulted from an accident, an ATV accident. He felt compassion for people in wheelchairs who constantly have to look up and are left out of situations. So he first invented Rewalk, an exoskeleton with a computer that helps paraplegics walk again, even participate in marathons. But that didn't help him because he is a quadriplegic. So he invented Up and Ride, that's in the picture, that allows quadriplegics like himself to stand and move in a convertible wheelchair. Look at him go. I also believe that enlightenment should begin at home. So 2 organizations I showcase are Tech Career, that helps young Ethiopians better prepare for entering the high-tech market in Israel, and SOFEN, that helps Arabs, particularly women, enter high-tech. Healing the spirit. At times, Israel has been called the PTSD capital or trauma capital of the world, especially true during periods of suicide bombings, constant rockets, and terrorism. But as a result, Israel has also developed practical methods to deal with trauma. Tikvot is an organization that helps soldiers injured through terrorism or accidents return to adaptive sports. INTRA, or the Israel National Therapeutic Riding Association, helps those injured through equine therapy. And I actually just got an email from Anita Shkady, who started that program, that she just has written a book about her work. Chaverut is another organization, a wonderful organization at Hadassah Hospital and other campuses that uses the creative arts to help patients heal. It was created by Rachel Etun, a personal friend, in memory of her daughter Ruth, who died at age 11 of cystic fibrosis after a long but remarkable illness journey. Chaverut creates a healing environment for patients, medical personnel, Jews and Arabs alike. I was greatly honored when Rachel asked me to give my book, Bridge to Healing, which has been translated into Hebrew as Gesher L'Marpeh, to graduates of her training program. And let's look at a video of Chaverut.
Oh Lord, help me find my way in this world.
מתוך ההתמודדות ארוכת השנים עם המחלה של רות, ואחרי כן התמודדות עם האובדן, עם הפטירה שלה, בעקבות החוויה הזו הקמתי את ארגון חברות. חברות מבקשת לחולל שינוי בעולם הרפואה ובחברה הישראלית, על ידי פיתוח התפיסה הייחודית, טיפולית, בה אנחנו מאמינים.
ההשפעה של חברות היא לא רק על המטופלים, המשפחות שלהם, אלא גם על הצוות הרפואי, על הצוות הפארה-רפואי, על הסטודנטים לרפואה, על כל מי שבעצם נוגע, מושפע מהאווירה המיוחדת ומהגישה השונה לחלוטין שיש לחברות.
רגע, אני שוכחת איפה אני יותר סלחנית למקום. כשיש משהו שעושה לך שמחה, אז זה מקל, רגע לא נוח שאתה נמצא בו.
בלעדי חברות, היה לי מצבים שהייתי מאוד מתוסכלת, לא ידעתי מה אני רוצה מעצמי. ברגע שהתחלתי לפגוש את ארגון חברות, עבר באיזשהו תהליך של השלמה. נכון, את לא תהיי פה בריאה, אבל את יכולה להפיק מפה את הכי טוב שאפשר. את יכולה לעבור עם עצמך תהליך של השלמה, של הבראה.
People come and there's smile and there's good energy and there's art and there's life.
מטופלים כרוניים הרבה פעמים חושבים על עצמם שהם לא שווים שום דבר. פתאום באים אנשים ואומרים, כן, אתה שווה. זה נותן להם המון, פתאום זה מחזיר אותם, אני לא החולה. אני. מה שנותן לנו בחיים זה הדברים הקטנים שמישהו עושה בשבילנו, לא הדברים הגדולים.
ההתנדבות שלי עם חברות היא לא רק גורמת לי להיות בן אדם טוב יותר, אלא גם רופאה בעתיד טובה יותר, ללמוד איך להקשיב לאחרים.
עמותת חברות מכניסה פה נשמה יתרה, וזה איזשהו משהו רוחני שמתווסף לטיפול במטופלים שלנו, בהחלט נשמה יתרה.
המוזיקה היא חלק שאמורה לעטוף בעצם את החלל, אז כל האווירה בבית חולים תהיה אווירה יותר חיובית, אווירה יותר מחויכת, אווירה יותר כלילה.
There's a lot of people out there that music or art has touched them in their lives, but because of illness or age, they've kind of just moved away from it. So to be able to light that spark again is wow.
בעצם זה באמת פשוט, הנשמה שלנו לא חולה, היא תמיד שלמה. הגוף שלנו נגמר, הגוף שלנו קלה, אבל הרוח תמיד חיה.
Oh Lord, let her see how good she is, how good she is to me.
Lastly, we're moving towards seeking peace. There's a moshav that sits practically on the Gaza border. It's often hit by rockets, and there a mosaic artist named Sameret Zamir painted a giant peace mural on the 9-meter-high border wall protecting the moshav. She takes colorful broken mosaic pieces and invites neighbors, school children, kids with special needs, and tourists to come and fill in the mosaic into the mural. Look how small she is relative to the size of the wall, yet how many people she has touched. Seeking peaceful coexistence. This is Rami. He lost his 14-year-old daughter and her friends to an Arab suicide bomber. Together with Bassam, a Palestinian father who lost his young daughter Abir to an Israeli soldier's bullet, and Robi Damelin, whose son David was killed by a Palestinian terrorist, these remarkable people formed an organization called the Parent Circle Families Forum, a place where Palestinian and Israeli families who have lost an immediate family member to terrorism meet to share their grief and pain and comfort each other. As they explain, our red blood is all the same. This amazing organization has created a camp for young people and a memorial day for all those lost in the conflict on both sides, whose participation around the world grows larger every year. This past year, over 200,000. This picture shows an organization called Kids for Peace, a coexistence group bringing together Israeli and Palestinian teens in Jerusalem to get to know one another and do projects. And the last slide, next to the last slide, is about a very special organization formed by a very special person. And on December 31st, 2020, almost at midnight, something special happened in the US Congress. The budget was finally approved and signed, and it was a jointly sponsored bipartisan bill introduced by Congresswoman Anita Lowy called the Partnership Fund for Peace. This bill approved $250 million over 5 years to support the work of the many coexistence groups in an umbrella organization called Alliance for Middle East Peace, which our oldest son, Avi, founded 17 years ago. I am extremely proud of this creation, which began by gathering a handful of disconnected NGOs and now has over 120 member organizations, quite a few referenced in the book. Like the Fund for Goodwill in Ireland that finally brought peace between Catholics and Protestants, ALMEP, Alliance for Middle East Peace, aims to bring peace through expanding coexistence work in fields of education, sports, music, camping, many other fields, and working together on issues of common concern between Israelis and Palestinians to create positive relations on the ground and fertile soil for a future peace. I'd like to play one more video and then tell you a little bit about the book before we end. Before we end, I'd like to mention that my book, Miracle Nation, is a feel-good, pride-inducing read intended for teens and above, makes an excellent bar bat mitzvah present or board member gift. It's easy to read because it has lots of short stories that could be read a little at a time, and it has thought-provoking questions at the end of each chapter for reflection and discussion, including in educational settings. Reading the book will inspire readers to support projects that resonate with them and maybe even become mitzvah heroes in their own right. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to seeing you in a moment and being able to answer any questions or take comments after the video we just saw. Thank you.
Thank you, Israela. Talk about getting verklempt many times during this presentation. So proud to be Jewish and support Israel from this. And anyway, I really appreciate this beautiful program, this book, all the things you put together. And if there are any questions, we open up the floor for Israela.
Or if anybody wants to share their experience in Israel, that's fine too.
Judith, you have to unmute, Judith.
I think she's talking, but we can't hear her.
Judith, you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
I got it. All right.
Okay.
Okay, let me start again. This book is one of the best books what I read about Israel, and generally I was extremely impressed. Although I'm an avid reader, this was a lot of new things which I found in the book. And what I think is one of the best things, quotation about how the Jews maintain their chosen people status when she wrote on page 28 on chapter 2 that by yearning to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, the Jews focused on prayer and good deeds as a way of serving God. I think this is the best statement of the book because she describes the way how we all remained Jews during the century. And who I am a little bit part of the Holocaust, being the first generation and going through a lot, I can appreciate some ideas of this book, like the way how she described all the situations, what happened, and the health of the disabled, which is amazing, and which I didn't know about.
Yes.
For
Thank
sharing.
you, Judith. Yeah. I was thinking too, this whole presentation would be a fabulous PR piece for Israel, which, you know, so many people don't know what Israel does for the rest of the world, which is unfortunate.
I do know about it, but not the extent what she presented in the book. It is absolutely excellent writing.
Thank you, Judith. Brenda.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Israela, both for this wonderful presentation and the previous wonderful presentation. Is this book available on Amazon?
It certainly is.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to buying it for my grandchildren.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So any other questions or comments for Israela? So thank you, Israela, and thank you all for attending. And please remember to go to Temple Beth David FL for Florida.org to check out all of Temple Beth David's adult education and scholar in resident offerings. Monday at 1 o'clock, Rabbi Deborah Eisenman will be teaching a course on happiness, the Jewish way. Also, please join us on Sunday, March 7th at 10 o'clock, when Adult Ed and Sisterhood will co-sponsor our mother and daughter team of Elaine Fleischer and Trina Pulliam to present and discuss the book, We Stand Divided, The Rift Between American Jews and Israel by Daniel Gordis.